All right, guys, today we're going to be talking about lever lockpicking basics, and I'm going to show off some of these brand new tools, very affordable, that Andy Mack is creating. It's going to help you get started in this new part of the hobby in a very affordable way. Stick around. All right, let's start out with the easy stuff first. This is a typical mortise lock. This one's very easy. This is a Yale. It's only 2 levers, but it's perfect for our demonstration. On these particular locks, the keyways are totally unprotected. In fact, if you tilt it like that and you point a light up in there, you can actually see the levers up inside of there. So completely unprotected keyway, and these are really easy to get access to. So what are we going to be doing here? Well, let's look at the theory before we start demonstrating any tools. I've already taken the screw out, so here's what we're doing. What we've got to do is find a way to tension that bolt. Now, here are the 2 levers that we're going to be dealing with. And there's the bolt. Notice how the bolt, when I line it with that little doorway, that little opening in the 2 levers, the bolt can then slide through to the open position. He'll go all the way back. So what's stopping him are these little stops right here because we're pushing against those. You can imagine those are going to bind in different orders because they're not super precisely machined. So we're going to put pressure on this bar while we try to pick these 2 levers in this case. Many locks have more levers, of course, but this is really an easy one to deal with. So how do we do that? Well, we're going to take the key. Now, the key obviously does everything that I just showed you, but without all the drama. Easy unlock. Most of these keys, you can see a couple things about this. First of all, the tip of the key extends past the last cut. And the reason it does that is so that when it goes through the keyway, on the other side, it sticks to the hole to keep it perfectly aligned so that key is not going to be flopping around. The other thing about the key is we have a stop right here, so we don't shove the key in too far. If we shove it in too far or not enough, those cuts are not going to align with those levers. So 2 important characteristics. The third thing we need to realize about this key is that usually this last one, right where my thumbnail is, that's the part that will tension the lock. And in this case, that's exactly right. The only weird thing about this keyway is this is a Yale. It's got a really weird little shape. Usually they're straight, but you need some kind of key that will slide into the keyway. If you can find one that'll fit in there, or you can just buy a blank and they're all marked. You can see what they are. Just buy a blank and then we can go to work on it. So it's something that'll slide in there, and that's what we're going to do to make our tensioner. So what I did is I just took a blank section or a blank key and I just cut everything off except that last little bit to give myself some tensioning. Now I did a couple more things to this key as well. On the top of it, I completely filed it flat, and you'll see why in just a moment. And I also cut the top of the bow off. So let's first see how this would work. We're going to slide that in there. Everything aligns just like the normal key when we turn it. And now it's firmly engaged with that tension. We are now tensioning. You can see it moving. We're tensioning that bolt. Now we need to find a way to manipulate the wires. And now you see why I filed off the top of this. I left a little gap there so I can get a wire into it. And it gives me a straight shot, and that also explains why I cut the top of the bow off. So I can get my wire, I can work straight down in there without having to work around that extra part of the bow and twist like that. Now you might notice it's a little bit awkward to try to tension it. I mean, you can. Some guys use pliers or their fingers, but a lot of times you want something with a little more leverage. You don't have to worry so much. So Andy Mack, he's been making these little guys for years. Basically a knurled steel donut. He cuts a slot in the top, threads a couple of holes. You can take your key that you've cut or modified, slide it down the side of there, like so, and then just tighten it down. You can do it finger tight, or I like to put a little extra on it, because otherwise, right when I get ready to have an unlock is when everything's going to fall apart. So kind of align it like, well, not quite like that, Bill. Try to keep it as flat as you can. So kind of like that. So now when we slide it in there and begin to unlock, now if this is in a door or in a vise, I could use my fingers, hold them well off to the side, apply tension, and I can really control it much better than if I were holding that key or trying to hold on to a pair of vice grip pliers. Now we come to one of the first products that Andy Mack has just produced. Now we need some wires. Andy Mack makes some of the nicest wires. I buy all of my wires from him because these are more than just bent piano wire. If you take a look at these, let's grab one of them. Just grab this one. There's a set of 6 They're all slightly different sizes, but a couple of things about this wire. First of all, the end of it is more than just polished, and I hope the camera can do this thing justice. The top of the wire is actually flattened. I mean, if I can get it to reflect just right. Both sides of this, because you can pick from both sides, lock to lock or unlock from either side. And the reason the top of that is flat is if it were rounded, it might roll off of the flat surface of the lever. By making the top of the wire or both sides of the wire flat, it kind of gives you a little bit better angle of attack to be able to not roll off the levers and stay fixed on them. The other thing that Andy's done, again, I really hope the camera does this justice. The edge of those, the very tip of these is slightly rounded. Again, when you start to roll it, the angle will change, and at some point, the top of that lever is going to be balanced on that. And if that's a very sharp cut, it's going to be a very distinctly different feel. Whereas if it's rounded, your feel will be the same throughout the rotation of picking that lever. So Andy did some great work. He also measured the dimensions, so you got 6 very precise lengths to go with any of these locks. All right, so let's figure out how we're going to do this. The way I normally pick the right length is from the center of the keyway. See this one, from the center of the keyway, this guy would be just a little bit too long. And let's try this guy. You find one from the center that will slide in, that's pretty close right there. So that would be a good choice. So we take our tensioner, we slide him in there, we begin to tension, and then I take my wire, I'm going to roll it off to the side here so I can get my wire in, like so. Then I apply tension, then I can begin manipulating those levers. That is how easy it is. This is one of the most simple, oops, now it's all going to explode on us. This is one of the most simple locks, pretty easy to pick, but it's a great one to cut your teeth on. If you're just learning how to pick lever locks, go with one of the simpler ones like this so you don't have to worry about all the additional complexities of the locks that I'm getting. We're ready to show you in just a minute. Anyway, let's set this aside and move in the complex locks. The second very common type of mortise lock will be what's called a shuttered lock, and they come in 2 different sizes. This is the first size. The way that we know the size is the width of the shutter. Now, when we compare the shutter lock to the previous lock, the regular mortise lock, notice in this one we can actually look up from any angle and you can look in there and see those levers. That's not true in a shutter lock, and that's because the shutter, the silver part, is actually an inner liner. And that's what actually tensions these locks. But it also prevents access to the levers from anywhere except through this little slot right here. So they come in 2 sizes. I said this is what's called a 5 gauge, and it's very easy. It's just basically the width of that shutter. In this case, it's I think it's 5.3 millimeter, something like that. But you've only got 2 sizes to worry about. If you're really curious, just take your key and measure the diameter of it. And that'll tell you that it's either a 5 gauge or the smaller one, and probably much more common is the 7 gauge. And this measures 4.2 millimeters across. Same type of shutter inside of there. So let's take a look at how this guy works. This is the proper key. So when we slide him in there, notice that I can still see the key. You can see it moving right there. And then when I begin to unlock, watch what happens here. As soon as I rotate that key just a little bit, the complete window is blocked now by the shutter. So that should tell me there's only a single slot in here, and it's right there, and I have to do all of my work through that tiny little slot. So when I rotate it up to there, I've got to find a way to get through that slot to get access to those levers at kind of a weird angle. Well, Andy Mack, leading us to the second product, created these guys. Now, he creates them in 2 sizes. Obviously, we have the larger one. Now, we have the stop, typical of all the keys, and then we have a little nib out there at the very end. And the same on the 4 gauge. So let's compare these for just a second. When I hold the key up, you'll notice that when I line those stops, I can't shove it in any further than that. But what you'll notice, if I can hold it still, is that this little nib that's on Andy's tool is further than the maximum cut for any of those levers. And that's because if we try to tension on any of these levers to tension that shutter, we're going to block access to some of these levers. So we actually have to block from our tension from the very rear of this lock, a very precise measurement. So let's take a look here, see the way this works. So we slide it in there. The stop perfectly aligns it with the front of it. And if you rotate it over to the other side, you couldn't do this if it was installed in the door, but this will show you what's happening. It lines the back of that little nib up with the curtain in the very back of the lock, which will then allow us to rotate it and to tension the lock. So very cool, and we can rotate him all the way like that until he's tensioned. Now that little nib doesn't block access to any of those levers, but now we're faced with another dilemma. When we're at this angle, it's hard to get around that little shutter. So we actually need a different wire. If we tried to use a flat wire, it wouldn't allow us to raise those levers high enough because of this angle that we're presented with. So instead of that, what Andy has done, let me set him off to the side here, is he's created two sets of wires. Now obviously depending on which side of the lock we're attacking from, we might need a wire with a right-hand turn. And in the case of these, we have the red handled for right hand. And when you look at these guys, not only are they perfectly dimensioned in length and perfectly polished and rounded and just beautiful work, but when I look at the top here, these have a little very precise offset, which helps you get around that shutter lock. So we have the right-hand side, so if we're picking and trying to push the levers that way, and then we have another set of levers with the opposite turn to get around the other way. So these would be the ones that we'd be looking at if we're trying to pick this lock today. So this is a 4-gauge lock. We're going to use the 4-gauge tensioner. We would slide him in there. Now, because this slot is now aligned, we can probably weave it in there, but what I like to do is leave it in the open position. I'd fish around, and this is probably not going to be the right size. I'm just going to grab one I think that will fit, just to show you how I weave it in there. Come on, hooked, come on, hooked. Then I align him like so, get everything as a package, and Andy's created this little slot on the top of the tool. And then I would begin to rotate, keeping it aligned, and that would align everything. And now, if this were in a door or in a vise, I could apply tension and I could begin to manipulate all those levers with this very nicely shaped tensioning wire. Through that little slot keeps it perfectly aligned. Both of these tools are handmade. Andy took a lot of time. He's been making tools for me for quite a while. Beautifully done, beautifully machined. It's like a mirror finish everywhere. He keeps the cost down by using these machine bolts as your tensioners. I'm sure he could come up with something a lot more expensive, but I prefer to keep the cost down. Beautifully done. He's already flattened the top of this out. Everything is perfectly dimensioned. I've tried this on about a dozen different 7-gauge locks and have had no problems. I've also tried the 5-gauge one, again, different dimensions. He won't obviously fit into the 7-gauge. So you really do need both of these tools. But these are the two most common gauges that I run into. I've never found a lock that one or the other wouldn't fit into. Anyway, guys, I just wanted to show off some of Andy Mack's new tools. As I said, I've been buying and using his stuff for years on lever locks. He does a great job. He's got a great YouTube channel as well, talking about the basics, doing a much better job than I can of teaching people how to pick lever locks. If you're interested in his website and his YouTube station, take a look down there and go check it out. And if you're also interested in any of these tools, I'm sure you can work something out with him. Just message him directly and tell him what you're interested in. Anyway, guys, what is going to be the giveaway this week? Well, I think you got it figured out. It will be the tensioner. You can even have my key, the complete set. Let me grab them. I spilled everything everywhere. The complete set of 6 wires for the simple mortise lock, as well as the curtain lockpick set, all made by Andy Mack in the UK. Appreciate your time, guys. Stay safe, stay legal, stick around. I'll tell you how to register to win all this stuff. Thanks for your time, guys. All you need to do is navigate to locklab.com, the tribal website, and scroll down in the middle of the page. You'll see all the giveaway buttons, Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. But the one you're looking for is the weekend review giveaway, purple band. Just click on it. It'll take you to the registration page. Again, scroll to the bottom, put in a good email address, so if you win, I can get in touch with you, let you know. Put in a username, doesn't matter what it is, and click submit. When you're done, you'll get a green check mark confirming your entry. Thanks, guys.